How a quiet genius hacked Press Your Luck and won $110,777.
In the early 1980s, the United States was a land of television dreams. Daytime game shows filled the screens of millions of households. People tuned in not only for entertainment, but for the possibility that ordinary men and women could walk away with life-changing prizes. It was a golden age for trivia, luck, and quick thinking. For one man from Ohio named Michael Larson, however, television wasn't just entertainment. It was a system, and like every system, he believed it could be solved. Michael Larson was not a rich man, nor was he particularly polished. Born in 1949, he grew up in the American Midwest, a quiet, practical world of working-class families and simple ambitions. But Michael was different. His mind didn't operate like everyone else's. He had an intense curiosity about how things worked: machines, puzzles, systems. Anything with rules fascinated him. He worked a variety of odd jobs over the years: truck driver, refrigerator repairman, air conditioner salesman. He was never fired for incompetence, but rarely stayed anywhere long. He always seemed to be chasing something: a method, a loophole, a way to beat the game. Michael loved game shows. To him, they represented the perfect blend of logic and luck, and he was convinced that luck was only an illusion. In 1983, a new game show premiered on CBS, Press Your Luck. Its slogan was, "Big bucks, no whammies." The format was simple. Contestants answered trivia questions to earn spins on a large electronic game board filled with flashing squares. Each square contained either a cash prize, a bonus, or the dreaded cartoon character known as the Whammy. When the contestant shouted, "Stop!" the flashing light stopped on one square. If it landed on money or a prize, that amount was added to the player's total. But if it landed on a whammy, a little red creature that danced across the screen and stole all the money, the contestant lost everything. To most viewers, it looked random, chaotic, and impossible to control. But to Michael Larson, something didn't feel right. One cold Ohio evening, Michael sat in his small living room watching Press Your Luck on his color television. As he watched the lights flash across the board, something unusual caught his eye. The pattern of the lights. It didn't seem random. He leaned forward, squinting. After several episodes, he started noticing that certain prize boxes lit up in predictable sequences. It was subtle, too subtle for the average viewer, but Michael had a photographic-like memory for visual patterns. He noticed that the cursor on the board never stopped completely at random. There were only a few paths the light seemed to take. If that was true, then the game was not luck at all. It was a system, one that could be memorized and mastered. To confirm his theory, Michael did something unusual for the time. He bought a VCR, video cassette recorder. In 1983, these machines were expensive, and few American households owned one. But for Michael, it was an investment, a tool for a grand experiment. Night after night, he recorded episodes of Press Your Luck. The tapes piled up in his living room. He watched them over and over, pausing and rewinding, studying the movement of the light across the board, frame by frame. Soon he realized his hunch was right. There weren't hundreds of random light paths, there were only 5 fixed patterns. Each pattern repeated itself in a loop. Once you recognized the sequence, you could predict exactly where the light would stop. Even more important, there were 2 squares on the board that never had a whammy. One of those squares almost always contained $5,000 and a bonus spin, the most valuable prize. Michael began to memorize the timing. He practiced pressing a button with perfect rhythm, matching the exact split second it would land on the safe square. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He didn't brag. He simply practiced, quietly, obsessively. As weeks passed, Michael's obsession deepened. His family noticed he spent hours in front of the TV, muttering to himself, clicking a stopwatch, recording notes on paper. He explained that he was studying how to win a game show, but few took him seriously. But Michael wasn't guessing anymore. He was training. He began taping a small red button to the arm of his chair, just like the one used on the show. He'd play his recordings, start the board sequence, and press the button at the exact right moment. Over time, he developed near-perfect accuracy. By late 1983, he was certain, if he could just get on the show, he could win more money than anyone had ever imagined.
That part wasn't easy. Contestants were chosen through auditions and interviews, and producers looked for fun, talkative personalities, not quiet, intense people who treated the show like a science experiment. Michael applied, but he knew he had to play a role. He presented himself as a friendly, slightly goofy guy from Ohio who just wanted a shot at some quick cash. He smiled, joked, and kept his secret buried deep. The producers liked his enthusiasm. He was invited to Los Angeles for taping in May 1984. Michael packed his things, withdrew his savings, and drove his old ice cream truck, yes, an actual ice cream truck, all the way to California. He was ready to change his life. CBS studios in Hollywood were buzzing that morning. Contestants were briefed, given makeup, and reminded that Press Your Luck was a game of chance. Michael sat quietly, barely speaking to the others, but inside, his mind was racing. He visualized the 5 board patterns over and over, replaying them in his head. The stage lights were bright, almost blinding. The studio audience cheered as host Peter Tamarkin greeted the players. Michael smiled nervously. His heart was pounding, but his mind was calm. He knew the sequences. He knew the timing. And he knew, if everything went as planned, that this was the day he would beat the system. The first part of the show was the trivia round. Contestants answered questions to earn spins on the board. Michael did reasonably well, not perfect, but good enough to earn a few chances. When the spinning began, he let his first few attempts play out naturally. He didn't want to attract attention too soon. The cursor stopped on modest prizes, $1,000, a trip, a few $100s more. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. The board reset. The lights began to dance. Michael's hand hovered over the button. He recognized the pattern instantly. His eyes tracked the motion. Up, right, down, and then click. The board stopped on $5,000 and a spin. Gasps rippled through the audience. The host cheered. Michael barely smiled. He knew it wasn't luck. He did it again. Another safe square, another $4,000, another bonus spin. Within minutes, his total shot past $10,000. The crowd roared. The host grinned, amazed at his luck. Michael's hands were steady. His eyes never left the board. Behind the cameras, the production staff began whispering. Contestants weren't supposed to be this consistent. The random lights were supposed to even things out, but Michael wasn't missing. He wasn't even hesitating. Each time the light began to move, he waited a split second, then hit the button, and it always landed on money. The director radioed to the control room. "Something's off. Look at his timing." But what could they do? The rules were clear. The board was random to the best of the producer's ability. No one had ever thought someone might memorize it. By the end of his first round, Michael's total was higher than most contestants ever achieved in an entire game. He was sweating, but composed. The audience loved him, the underdog who just couldn't stop winning. During the commercial break, crew members exchanged nervous glances. One producer muttered, "He's not lucky. He's doing something." But when the cameras rolled again, there was nothing they could do. Michael Larson looked into the flashing lights and saw not chaos, but order. He wasn't gambling. He was executing a plan he had built, tested, and perfected for months. He pressed the button again. "Stop!" he shouted. The board lit up, $5,000 and a spin. The crowd went wild, and Michael Larson smiled. Not because of the money, but because he knew he had just beaten the system. The studio lights were hot, the air electric. The audience didn't yet realize they were witnessing something that would go down in television history. Michael Larson, a truck driver from Ohio with thinning hair and nervous energy, had already surpassed the totals of most contestants in the show's history, and he wasn't done. The host, Peter Tamarkin, tried to keep the energy high, his trademark smile bright under the lights. But even he could feel something strange in the air. There was luck, and then there was this.
Michael returned for the second round of the game, his prize total already hovering above $10,000. The audience cheered his name as the lights dimmed and the familiar chime of the Press Your Luck board filled the studio. He had watched hundreds of episodes. He had mapped every square, every pattern, every single frame. To him, this board wasn't a mystery. It was a machine with predictable gears. The light began to dance. "Stop!" The square froze. $4,000 and a spin. The audience erupted again. Peter laughed. "Michael, you're doing great. You must have some good luck charm today." Michael just nodded and wiped sweat from his forehead. He didn't want to appear too confident, but inside he felt an almost mechanical focus. He had done the impossible. He'd found a weakness in the system, and now he was exploiting it flawlessly. In the control booth, panic was quietly spreading. "Is something wrong with the board?" one technician asked. The game's producer, Bill Carruthers, frowned and shook his head. "No, I checked the sequences. It's working fine. He's just hitting the right spots." "But he's always hitting the right spots," another staffer said. Bill stared at the screen, trying to understand. There was no cheat device, no communication with anyone off stage. The man was simply pressing the button at exactly the right time. They couldn't stop him. There were no rules against being good. Back on stage, Michael sat perfectly still between turns. His eyes were fixed on the lights, calculating, timing. He knew that if he could keep landing on squares number 4 or 8, the two safe positions, he could accumulate spins indefinitely. Every $5,000 and a spin result gave him another chance to play. It was an infinite loop of profit, and no one else realized it yet. His total climbed. $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. The host's jokes grew more forced, the audience's cheers louder, but even the studio spectators began to sense something uncanny. This wasn't luck anymore. It was something else. Something mathematical, obsessive, unstoppable. Michael's behavior fascinated the crew. Between spins, he would mumble to himself, his lips moving in silent rhythm with the flashing lights. "Ah, right, stop, up, left, down, stop." Each word corresponded to a memorized pattern. He had studied those movements for months, and now, under blinding lights and with thousands of dollars on the line, his memory was perfect. By the 20-minute mark, Larson was sweating heavily. The game had gone far longer than normal. Usually, a contestant's round would last 2 or 3 minutes before hitting a whammy or running out of spins. Larson's had been going for over half an hour. "Stop!" $3,000 and a spin. The board beeped and reset again. Another spin. Another chance. The host turned toward the producers off stage. "How many spins does he have left?" Someone replied off mic, "Still 17. Peter Tamarkin's smile faltered for a split second before he turned back to camera. 17 spins! Well, Michael, I hope you've got a lot of energy because this could go on all night." The audience laughed. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Michael's winnings hit $50,000. The board had never handled that much data before. The lights lagged slightly as the total updated. He kept going. $55,000, $60,000, $70,000. The crew's anxiety turned into awe. Some whispered that they were watching television history being rewritten in real time. Others wondered if CBS might have to cut the feed. There were limits to how much the show could pay. But Michael wasn't breaking any rules. He was just pressing his luck perfectly.
Across the stage, the other contestants, Ed Long and Janet Jones, sat frozen. They had long since stopped smiling. Ed, a tall, gray-haired man, folded his arms and muttered under his breath. Janet just stared at Michael, her eyes wide, her forced grin barely holding. Every time Michael hit another big number, the crowd roared, and Janet clapped automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. She realized she wasn't competing in a game anymore. She was watching a man dismantle it. At one point, the show nearly ground to a halt. Michael's streak had gone on for so long that CBS had to pause filming. The tape reels were running out of space. Technicians had to replace them mid-show while the contestants sat under the lights. Peter Tamarkin took a sip of water and looked at Michael. "Are you doing okay, Michael?" Michael nodded, smiling faintly. "I'm just pressing my luck." When filming resumed, he went right back to work, eyes sharp, hands steady. The game had now been running for 40 minutes. Michael's total? $80,000. The host was sweating as much as the contestant. The crew whispered behind cameras. The control room director muttered, "If he hits $100,000, we're in trouble. The show's insurance doesn't even cover that." But Michael didn't know or care about the network's panic. He was inside his own universe, counting patterns, feeling the rhythm of the board, pressing at exactly the right moment. He hit $90,000, then $95,000. Then, stop! The board froze.
$5,000 and a spin. The crowd leapt to their feet. The host's mouth fell open. He had done it again. The show's official record before that day had been around $30,000. Michael Larson had tripled it and was still going. When his total finally passed $100,000, the audience screamed so loudly the microphones peaked. Confetti rained from the ceiling. But the game wasn't over yet. He still had spins left. For the first time that day, Michael hesitated. He glanced at the scoreboard, then at the crowd. His eyes flicked toward the other contestants. He had been playing for almost an hour. His concentration was slipping. He took a deep breath and went for one more. Stop! $4,000. He nodded, exhaling. One more spin. Stop! $3,000. And finally, the board offered him the chance to pass his remaining spins. Michael paused for a long moment. The host asked, Michael, you can keep going or you can pass your spins and lock in your winnings. What do you want to do? The studio went silent. Michael looked down at his trembling hands. Then, quietly, I think I'll pass. The crowd cheered, relieved. The impossible streak was over. When the show ended, Michael Larson's total stood at $110,237, an astronomical figure for 1984. He had broken every record the show had ever set, and likely ever would again. The host congratulated him warmly, still slightly dazed. The other contestants managed polite smiles. Behind the scenes, the producers' faces were pale. As the credits rolled, a quiet murmur spread among the crew. Someone said, "He beat the system. He actually beat the damn system." In the weeks that followed, CBS launched an internal investigation. The network's executives were furious and confused. They reviewed the tapes, studied the machine, and questioned the staff. Was it rigged? Did someone feed Larson information? But every piece of evidence said the same thing. No cheating, no collusion, no fraud. Michael Larson had simply memorized the board. They found notes in his handwriting, sketches of the board layout, and even a homemade buzzer device he used for timing practice. It was all legal. As one CBS lawyer put it, he didn't cheat. He just learned what we didn't realize was learnable.
When the episode aired in June 1984, it became an instant sensation. Millions watched in disbelief as a regular guy from Ohio destroyed a game designed to be unbeatable. Some viewers called him a genius. Others said he was a fraud who had ruined the fun. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had ever seen anything like it. Michael Larson's name was suddenly everywhere. Newspapers, talk shows, radio interviews. CBS even debated whether to air the second half of the episode at all, fearing embarrassment. But they did, and ratings skyrocketed. Despite his new fame, Michael's life didn't change the way he'd hoped. He didn't become a celebrity or a financial success story. Instead, the windfall brought him more problems than freedom. He received his check in several installments, but he struggled to manage it. Friends, family, and strangers came to him asking for help or handouts. He gave away money, made risky investments, and soon found himself under financial stress again. By the end of 1984, the man who had beaten a game show was nearly broke once more. The studio had gone quiet once the audience left. Confetti still clung to the stage floor, and the faint smell of hot studio lights hung in the air. Michael Larson stood alone for a moment, staring at the scoreboard that still displayed his impossible total, $110,237. He smiled, but it wasn't joy that filled him. It was something else. Vindication. He had proven what he always believed, that every system, no matter how random it seems, has a pattern, and that someone smart enough, patient enough, could find it. But life, as he would learn, is far less predictable than a flashing game board. When Michael returned to his small town in Ohio, he was treated like a local hero. Neighbors came to shake his hand. Reporters knocked on his door. Children in the neighborhood shouted "No whammies" whenever they saw him drive by in his old ice cream truck. He had money now, more than he had ever dreamed of. He bought gifts for friends, gave cash to relatives, and spent freely. But Michael had never been good with money. He was a thinker, not a planner. And within months, the fortune that had seemed limitless began to disappear. He invested in a small business that failed. He lent money to acquaintances who never paid him back. And the rest he kept in cash, stacks of it hidden in boxes and drawers around his modest house. The man who had outsmarted a television network was now outsmarted by everyday life. Even after his press your luck triumph, Michael couldn't stop chasing the thrill of the system.
He bought lottery tickets by the handful, searching for patterns in the numbers. He spent hours studying new game shows, trying to find another flaw like the one he'd found before. He told a friend, "Lightning struck once, it can strike again." But lightning, as it turned out, rarely strikes the same place twice. His obsession with games turned into paranoia. He was convinced that new opportunities, hidden patterns, secret codes were waiting for him in the most unlikely places. When a local radio station announced a Christmas contest offering $30,000 to listeners who could identify songs for a month straight, Michael saw it as destiny. He listened obsessively, recording every broadcast, cataloging the songs by title and artist. For a while, it seemed to work. He was winning smaller prizes, inching toward the jackpot. But then, in the middle of the contest, disaster struck. It was December. One icy morning, Michael came home to find his house broken into. The door was ajar, his drawers were open, and the boxes of cash he'd hidden, the last of his Press Your Luck winnings, were gone. Nearly $50,000 in cash had vanished. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where his money had been. The man who had once controlled every light on a game show board was now powerless in the face of real life's randomness. He went to the police, but they couldn't help. There were no fingerprints, no suspects. Michael never recovered the money. After that, something inside him changed. He moved away quietly, leaving Ohio behind. Some said he went to Florida, others claimed he drifted through the South looking for work. His friends and relatives lost touch.
In the 1990s, game show fans still remembered him as the Press Your Luck guy, the man who beat the board. His legendary episode became something of a myth. Reruns were rarely shown as CBS was embarrassed by how easily their show had been cracked. But among dedicated game show enthusiasts, his feat was considered the greatest single performance in TV game show history. They studied the footage the same way Michael had once studied his recordings, frame by frame, analyzing his timing, his control, his nerve. What had started as a story about luck had become a story about human precision. And yet, the man himself had vanished. In the early 2000s, documentary producers and journalists began tracking down former contestants and staff from Press Your Luck to tell the story in full. When they reached out to find Michael Larson, they discovered he had lived a turbulent final decade. After moving from place to place, he had become involved in several small, dubious business ventures, one of which was investigated by federal authorities for fraud. Larson himself was never charged, but it was clear he had fallen on hard times. He reportedly lived for a while in Florida, then in California, before returning to the Midwest. He was said to have been reclusive, distrustful, and perpetually searching for his next opportunity, the next system to beat. In 1999, Michael Larson died of throat cancer in Florida. He was only 49 years old. At the time of his death, few knew who he really was. There were no headlines, no obituaries celebrating the man who had outwitted a network. He died quietly, far from the lights of Hollywood and the applause of the studio audience. But a few years later, his story resurfaced. In 2003, the Game Show Network aired a 2-hour documentary titled Big Bucks, The Press Your Luck Scandal. For the first time, millions saw the unedited footage of Michael Larson's legendary run. Viewers could see his concentration, his timing, his unflinching calm. They could watch as producers whispered off camera, unsure what was happening. The documentary didn't portray him as a cheater. It portrayed him as something far more complex, a man whose intelligence, obsession, and desperation collided in one unforgettable moment. Many viewers came away not judging him, but admiring his strange brilliance. As one commentator put it, Michael Larson didn't cheat the game. He mastered it. In the aftermath of the Larson incident, the Press Your Luck production team completely overhauled the game board system. They introduced thousands of possible light patterns and sequences, too many for anyone to memorize. The show added new safeguards, random number generators, and updated electronics. In short, they rebuilt the game to be truly random. Michael Larson had forced an entire industry to confront the idea that human pattern recognition could defeat artificial randomness. It was a humbling revelation and a testament to the power of obsessive human focus. Looking back, it's clear that Michael Larson embodied a strange paradox. He was brilliant, a man who saw order where others saw chaos, but he was also self-destructive, unable to use that brilliance for stability or happiness. He could master a TV game board, but not the unpredictable patterns of life itself. Those who knew him said he was friendly, generous, sometimes charming, but always chasing something invisible, always convinced that another hidden system was out there, waiting to be decoded. Years later, Peter Tamarkin, the show's host, spoke about Larson in interviews.
"I liked Michael," he said. "He wasn't cheating, he just figured it out. And you could tell, when he was up there, that he was in another zone. He was calm, but you could see the math happening in his eyes." Producer Bill Carruthers admitted he was both horrified and impressed. "He did what no one thought was possible," Carruthers said. "We created a game meant to be unbeatable, and this guy from Ohio just sat in his living room and broke it." Michael Larson's story remains one of the most fascinating examples of human pattern recognition and the psychology of obsession. It proved that no system is truly foolproof, not even one designed by experts. It showed that determination, curiosity, and obsession can sometimes blur the line between genius and madness. And it reminded television producers everywhere that games of chance are only random until someone decides to look closer. If Michael Larson had lived longer, he might have enjoyed the renewed fame his story brought. He might have laughed at the documentaries, the internet fan pages, the Reddit threads dissecting every frame of his gameplay. He might have felt proud to know that his name had become part of pop culture history, the symbol of the man who beat the system. But perhaps, knowing him, he would have shrugged and said, "It wasn't luck, it was just math." Today, Press Your Luck continues to air in modernized forms, hosted by new generations of presenters. The board is digital now, its patterns truly random, its whammies reanimated in high definition. But every time a contestant steps up and says, "Big bucks, no whammies," somewhere in the collective memory of game show history, Michael Larson's shadow lingers. He remains the man who proved that luck, the very foundation of so many games, might just be an illusion, and that in the blink of an eye, with enough patience and precision, a single person can bring an entire system to its knees. Michael Larson's journey is both inspiring and tragic. It's the story of a man who reached absolute clarity for a few shining moments, who saw the world as a sequence of patterns he could master, and who paid for that clarity with the rest of his life. He didn't steal, he didn't hack, he didn't cheat. He just noticed what no one else noticed. In that sense, his victory on Press Your Luck was more than a game show win. It was a testament to the human mind's power to find order in chaos, and a warning of how obsession can consume even the brightest mind. When people look back at that day in May 1984, they don't just see flashing lights and cartoon whammies. They see a man who, for one extraordinary hour, proved that luck could be beaten.